So let's talk about Auguste Rodin. You definitely know his work, but his story? It's all about rebellion, scandal, and totally reinventing what sculpture could even be. Let's get into it.
I mean, we've all seen this guy, right? The thinker. He's practically a universal symbol for, well, thinking. But the man who made him, Auguste Rodin, he was the exact opposite of quiet and contemplative. He was a full-blown revolutionary who just smashed the rules of 19th century art. His goal? To capture what it really feels like to be human, something raw and real.
And like any good rebel, his career kicked off with a huge scandal. To really get Rodin, you have to picture the world he was up against, this super rigid academic art scene. What's so crazy is the accusation itself. So Rodin shows up with this sculpture, The Age of Bronze, and the critics just lose their minds. It was so real, so lifelike, not perfect or idealized at all. They literally could not believe a person sculpted it. Their conclusion? He must have cheated. They accused him of something called casting from life. Basically, making a mold directly on a person's body. And back in the 1870s, that was like the ultimate sin for an artist, a total taboo. It was considered a cheap trick, not art. Rodin was so insulted, he went and got photos of his model just to point out, see, it's not the same, I made this. And really, that's what the whole battle was about. On one side, you have the establishment, sculptures that were perfect, smooth, usually gods or heroes, just standing there looking noble. And on the other side, you've got Rodin, who was obsessed with the messy, complicated, moving truth of the human body, every flaw included. The whole scandal must have been tough for him, but it absolutely put him on the map as this radical new artist to watch. So that whole controversy basically forced Rodin to double down and come up with his own way of doing things, methods that nobody could copy. And his biggest, most brilliant idea, it wasn't about the big finished statues. It was about all the little parts. Okay, so picture this. You walk into his studio. You're not going to see a bunch of finished sculptures all lined up. Nope. What you'd see is just chaos. A library of body parts. Drawers, shelves, just overflowing with plaster hands, feet, torsos, heads. It was less of an artist's studio and more of a creative warehouse.
And he had this really weird name for all these pieces, a bâtisse. It's a French butcher's term for giblets. Yeah, giblets. It sounds kind of gruesome, right? But it's actually perfect. It shows how he saw the body as a collection of expressive parts, where even a single hand could tell a whole story. This process he developed was a total game changer. So first, he'd model hundreds and hundreds of individual limbs in clay. Then he'd make a bunch of plaster casts of every single part. What this did was give him this massive three-dimensional library of human forms, and then he could just assemble and reassemble them into totally new figures. It's like he invented the sculptor's version of Legos. In this whole Lego method, this way of building figures, it was the engine for his most massive, most ambitious project ever. One single job that ended up being the source for almost all of his most famous works. So back in 1880, Rodin gets this commission to create these huge bronze doors for a new museum. He gets inspired by Dante's Inferno, and the project becomes the Gates of Hell. Here's the crazy part. He worked on it for almost 40 years, and he never even finished it. But why? Because it stopped being just a set of doors. It turned into his personal creative playground, this whole universe of figures he could just pull from whenever he wanted. Yeah, the gates became this incubator for his best ideas. He'd sculpt these little figures to be part of the huge design, but then he'd look at them and realize, wow, there's so much life in just this one little piece. So he'd literally pluck them out, blow them up in size, and turn them into their own standalone masterpieces. Just look right here. See that guy at the very top of the gates, looking down on all the chaos? Rodin originally just called him the poet. Look familiar? Well, that little guy is the thinker. Rodin just pulled him out of the composition, made him huge, and created the icon that we all recognize today. And he did the exact same thing with this embracing couple. You see them here. Originally, they were part of this tragic scene on the gates, but then he kind of realized that their passion didn't really fit with the whole eternal damnation vibe. So he took them out, and on its own, it became The Kiss, one of the most famous sculptures about love in history. It is the ultimate act of artistic recycling. So this freedom he had to reuse, to rethink, to reimagine his own work, it was all for one reason. He was trying to sculpt the invisible.
Rodin wasn't interested in just sculpting bodies, he wanted to sculpt feelings. He was sculpting genius, struggle, love, despair. And this obsession with sculpting the internal, it led to maybe his biggest public disaster. He gets a job to make a statue of the famous novelist Honoré de Balzac. Everyone's expecting, a standard, respectable statue, and what he delivers is this. The critics were just vicious. I mean, they called it a snowman in a straitjacket, a dribbling candle. Ouch. But see, Rodin couldn't have cared less what Balzac actually looked like. He famously said he was trying to create art that wasn't just photography and sculpture. He wanted to capture the man's creative genius, that raw, powerful spirit. It was just too much, too abstract for people. The commission got rejected, and the statue wasn't even cast in bronze until long after he was gone. He pulled a similar move with the Burghers of Calais. So the city of Calais commissions him to honor these 6 local heroes who offered their lives to save the town. They wanted a monument to heroism. But Rodin, he completely refused to make them look like triumphant heroes. Instead, he sculpted the moment of their agonizing walk to what they believed was their own execution, that moment of pure internal struggle. Look closely. It's not one glorious group. It's 6 separate men, each one trapped in his own private hell. You can feel it in their bodies, the defeat, the fear, the doubt, but also that flicker of determination. And get this, he insisted it be placed on the ground, at eye level, not up on some high pedestal. He wanted us to stand right there with them, to feel their humanity up close. So when we picture Rodin's work, we usually think of the big stuff, right? The massive bronze and marble statues. But if you want to find where the real magic, the real revolution happened, you have to look somewhere completely different. Because his true genius wasn't in the finished, polished piece. It was all in the process. And for him, that process happened in plaster. Plaster was his sketch pad. It's what he used to cast his clay ideas, to break them apart, stick them back together, and try things out. Looking at his plasterworks is like getting a direct look into his brain while he was creating. And this is what his studio looked like. It's not a museum gallery. It's this ghostly white forest of experiments and possibilities. Every single one of these plaster figures is a thought in physical form, an idea, a mistake, a happy accident, all captured right before it got locked into bronze. This is the laboratory where he broke all the rules. Think about it. Rodin took the human body, something artists had been sculpting forever, and he literally shattered it into fragments, all to find a deeper, more emotional truth. And that really makes you wonder, right? When we look around today, what conventions, what ideas that we just take for granted, what needs to be broken apart so we can find a new truth?